The most terrifying crimes, I think, aren't always the ones where you see the violence happen.
Mm.
They're the ones where you see the interruption, you see a life, moving in a straight line. It's mundane, it's productive, it's normal. And then, in the span of a single timestamp, that line just stops.
Right.
We are looking at a case today that is defined by a digital silence so loud that it eventually changed the laws of the American West.
It's a silence that lasted for nearly 2 years. But what makes this specific case, worthy of a deep dive isn't just the tragedy of it or the absolute heartbreak for the family. It's the forensic pivot.
The pivot.
Yeah. We're looking at the homicide of Dylan Rounds in Lucin, Utah. And usually in these remote, high-desert homicides, the isolation is the killer's best friend.
Of course.
No witnesses, no cameras, no body.
That's the classic perfect crime setting, right?
Yeah.
The middle of nowhere.
Historically, yes. Absolutely. If you wanted to make someone disappear, you went to the desert. But this case proves that the whole concept of the perfect crime is, it's dying. And it's dying because of what we all carry in our pockets.
The cell phone.
The cell phone. We're going to break down how a nobody investigation utilized what I call accidental digital evidence to secure a conviction. We're talking about a phone that essentially testified from beyond the grave.
And it's not just about the trial, is it? We are talking about the legislative fallout, this thing called HB 366, or Dylan's Law. I really want to understand how a 19-year-old farmer's disappearance in the middle of nowhere forced the entire state of Utah to rewrite how they handle privacy data and missing persons cases.
Yeah.
Because that seems like a massive leap from a local tragedy to statewide policy.
It is a massive leap, but you'll see it was a necessary one. At its core, you have a collision here between a 19-year-old visionary trying to literally terraform the desert and a 60-year-old career criminal who is using that exact same desert to hide from the world. It's a clash of, modernity versus frontier violence.
Let's start with that frontier, because I think when people hear Utah, they're thinking ski slopes, Park City, maybe the bustle of Salt Lake City. That is not Lucin.
Not even close, Lucin is. It's a forensic void. Geographically, we're talking about 200 miles northwest of Salt Lake, right up against the Nevada border. It's an old railroad ghost town.
A ghost town?
Pretty much. The landscape is just salt flats, sagebrush, and cracked earth. It's stark, and it's beautiful in a really rugged way, but it is incredibly unforgiving.
I was looking at the maps of Box Elder County while prepping for this, and the sheer scale of it, it's just difficult to wrap your head around. It feels like the kind of place you go when you really, really don't want to be found.
That's exactly the demographic it attracts. And that creates a very specific social dynamic.
Yeah.
You have people who value extreme privacy or off-grid living. And that spectrum ranges from I want to grow my own food and just be left alone.
The homesteader type.
Right. All the way to, I have a warrant in 3 states, and I need a place where the sheriff is 4 hours away.
And the lack of infrastructure is so critical here. I mean, if I get into an argument with my neighbor in the suburbs, I call 911, and a cruiser is there in 5 minutes. In Lucin.
In Lucin, you are effectively your own law enforcement. Disputes are settled privately. It's closer to the 1880s than the 2020s in terms of conflict resolution.
Wow.
And that is the stage where Dylan Rounds and James Brenner collided.
Okay, so let's profile these two. Because the contrast is so stark, it almost feels like it was written for a movie, but it's tragically real life. You called Dylan a visionary, which is a big word for a 19-year-old, but looking at the source material, it actually fits. Who was this kid?
Dylan Rounds, born August 1st, 2002. He wasn't just some kid playing farmer. He was a genuine agricultural entrepreneur. Grew up in a farming family, had it in his blood. By the time he was 17, he had partnered with his grandfather to buy huge tracts of land out there in Lucin.
17 years old. I mean, most teenagers are worried about prom or getting their driver's license. He's buying land in a salt flat.
And not just buying it, he was improving it.
Yeah.
And you have to understand the agronomy here. Farming in Lucin is not like farming in Iowa or, the Willamette Valley. The soil is hostile. Water is scarce. It's a battle.
Right.
So he spent 2 full summers doing nothing but prepping the land clearing brush, installing these complex irrigation systems, digging trenches. He was trying to grow grain and sunflowers in a place that effectively wants to kill anything green.
The sources kept mentioning this metaphor of the sunflower. He was trying to bring color and life to this desolate place. It sounds poetic, but knowing even a little about farming, that's just back-breaking, relentless labor.
It is. And by the spring of 2022, he was finally ready to plant. He had put in all that sweat equity. He was right there, right on the threshold of seeing this massive, crazy gamble payoff. He represents that classic American archetype. The pioneer.
The builder.
The builder, exactly. He was looking at that empty horizon and seeing a future.
And then you have the neighbor, James Brenner.
The complete antithesis of the builder. Brenner was 60 years old at the time. He was squatting in this dilapidated trailer on a piece of land that was adjacent to Dillon's. He wasn't improving the land. He was just occupying space.
Squatting implies he didn't own it.
He did not. He was doing odd jobs, helping out here and there on local properties. But his background is where the red flags they turn into sirens. Brenner is what criminologists call a career recidivist.
Okay, so define that for us in this specific context. We know it means a repeat offender, but what does his history tell us about his psychology?
It tells us he has an incredibly low threshold for violence and a very high resistance to any form of rehabilitation. His rap sheet spans decades, multiple states. We were talking about a malicious shooting charge in Maryland 30 years ago that was originally charged as attempted murder.
Wow.
Malicious wounding. Multiple federal gun charges for being a felon in possession.
I saw a note in the case file about an assault with a lawn chair. That sounds almost comical until you realize the kind of damage that can do.
Allegedly beat a man with a lawn chair in Box Elder County. Aggravated assault. That detail, it speaks to impulsivity. This isn't some calculated, organized crime hitman. This is a guy who just explodes when he's agitated.
And he had migrated to Lucin because it's a place where a guy with a rep sheet like that can just, well, disappear.
Precisely. It's the perfect hiding spot.
But here is the part that gets so sticky for me. The sources say they knew each other. Brenner wasn't a stranger lurking in the bushes.
No, and that's the propinquity effect. In criminology, proximity creates relationships, for better or for worse. In a place that isolated, you rely on who is around you. Brenner had helped Dillon bale hay. He was sometimes characterized as a family friend or at least, a neighborly acquaintance.
That is just terrifying. You're out there working alone in the desert, and the only guy around to help you fix a tractor is someone with a history of attempted murder.
Dillon likely just saw Brenner as this eccentric old guy living in a trailer, a bit of a loner. He probably had no idea about the extent of the violence in Brenner's past.
But Brenner certainly viewed Dillon through a specific lens, didn't he?
I believe so. A territorial one.
Yeah.
We see this in squatter psychology. They start to view the land they occupy as theirs, even if they have no deed, no legal claim.
Right.
And Dillon was changing the landscape. He was moving trucks, he was building sheds, he was creating activity and noise. To a guy like Brenner who wants silence and invisibility above all else, Dillon's ambition was an annoyance, a disruption.
A threat, even.
Potentially, in his mind.
So the stage is set. You have the builder and the recidivist. It's Memorial Day weekend, 2022. Let's get into the environment and the timeline of that morning.
Okay, so it's Friday, May 27th. There was a storm forecast. And if you know anything about farming, you know the weather dictates your entire life. Dillon is rushing, working against the clock to get seed in the ground before the rain hits.
So he's working late. He's exhausted.
He's tired. He's pushing himself. And this brings us to Saturday morning, May 28th. The timeline here is haunting because we have these digital breadcrumbs that give us this precise, chilling window of when Dillon Rounds simply ceases to exist.
This is what you call the 32-minute window.
The 32-minute window. We need to walk through this minute by minute because it absolutely dismantles any theory that this was an accident or a runaway situation.
Okay, start the clock.
6:52 a.m. Dillon makes a phone call to his grandmother.
Proof of life.
Undeniable proof of life. The call is totally normal. His grandmother said his tone was normal. He tells her the plan for the morning. He is heading down to the shed near Brenner's trailer to move his grain truck. He wants to get it under shelter before the rain finally hits.
Just a mundane chore. He's not sounding distressed. He's not whispering, Brenner's acting weird or anything like that.
Not at all. It's completely business as usual. He hangs up. Based on the distance from his camper to the shed, investigators estimate he likely reaches the gate to that area around 6:57 a.m. He walks to the grain truck. We estimate he arrives at the truck, which, and this is key, is parked very close to Brenner's trailer at approximately 7:02 a.m.
So 7:02 a.m., he is at the location. He's getting ready to move the truck.
And then silence. Just complete digital silence. No more outgoing calls, no texts.
But the phone is still on.
The phone is still on. And at 7:27 a.m., the phone generates a piece of evidence that is just baffling.
The video.
A video. But Dillon isn't filming.
We're definitely going to get into the content of that video in the forensic section, but just looking at the clock here, that is less than 30 minutes. 6:52, he's on the phone with his grandma. By 7.27, the crime is effectively over, and the phone is in the possession of someone else.
It's brutal efficiency. It implies an ambush or an immediate, overwhelming confrontation. There was no long standoff. There was no argument. Dylan went to move a truck, and 20 minutes later, he was gone.
So the weekend passes. Dylan doesn't call his mom for Memorial Day. He doesn't call his grandma back. When does the alarm bell actually ring? Because in a place like Lucin, I'd imagine not hearing from someone for a few hours is pretty normal, right?
It is normal. Cell service is spotty out there. But Dylan was reliable. He was in constant contact with his family, especially his mom and grandparents. By Monday, May 30th, Memorial Day, the silence was just too loud. The family realizes something is deeply wrong. They report him missing.
And the cavalry comes in. Box Elder County Sheriff, the FBI. But searching Lucin, that isn't like searching a suburban neighborhood.
No, it's like searching the surface of the moon. It's an immense area. You have scrub brush, you have ravines, old abandoned mine shafts. You could walk 10 feet past a body and never, ever see it.
So the initial search focused on the grain truck, I assume?
Exactly. It was the last known point of contact. The truck was there at the shed, but Dylan wasn't.
At what point does the eye of the investigation, turn toward James Brenner? Was it immediate?
He was a person of interest, almost immediately, just due to proximity. He's the neighbor. He's right there. But the shift from neighbor to prime suspect happened because of his own behavior. He started acting erratic.
Oh, so...
And then a key witness stepped forward. Another neighbor, a man named Don Hately.
Okay.
Brenner approached Hately and asked him to, and this is a direct quote, safekeep some guns.
Safekeep. That's a very weird word choice.
It is. Brenner explicitly told Hately he feared the law would come and take them. Now, just pause for a second. If you're an innocent neighbor and a boy goes missing next door, you might worry about the police asking you questions. That's normal. But you don't start stashing your weapons unless you know you aren't supposed to have them.
Because he's a convicted felon.
Exactly. He was a prohibited possessor. Possession of a firearm by a felon is a serious federal crime. So by handing those guns to a neighbor, he was trying to clean his house before the police came knocking. But in doing so, he handed them the lever they needed to pry this whole case open.
This is the old Al Capone strategy, isn't it? You can't prove the murder yet, so you get him on the tax evasion, or in this case, the gun charge.
It's a holding strategy. It takes him off the board. On June 16th, they execute a search warrant on Brenner's trailer. They find muzzle-loading accessories, black powder stuff. That gave them enough cause to dig deeper, and that led to the recovery of the .22 caliber rifle and the other guns he'd hidden with Hately.
So they arrest him on the federal firearms charges. He's in custody. He's off the board.
He's in a cell. The community is safer, temporarily. But Dylan is still missing. And this is where the investigation hit that wall that so many rural cases face. You have a suspect in jail on a gun charge. You have a missing boy. But you have no body. You have no murder weapon. You can definitively link to the crime, yet you have no eyewitnesses.
This is the no-body dilemma. How hard is it really to prosecute a murder without any remains? I feel like I see it on TV shows all the time, but in the real world.
In reality, it's an absolute nightmare for the district attorney. The defense just has to plant that one seed of doubt. They just have to say, Dylan ran away. Dylan is in Mexico. Dylan wanted to start a new life. Without a body to prove death, you have to prove the impossibility of life.
Wow.
You have to prove he couldn't possibly be alive.
And to do that, they needed something much better than just circumstantial evidence. They needed a witness.
And since no human being saw what happened in that shed, they had to turn to the digital spectrum. This is where we need to talk about digital witnessing.
Let's get technical. The phone. Dylan's phone was missing.
It was, for weeks. But eventually, investigators utilized the last known location data, the pings from the cell towers, to narrow down a search radius.
Even with spotty service?
Even with spotty service, it gives you a general area. And that general area led them to a pond in Lucin.
A pond in the desert? That sounds significant.
It's a major water source in the area. They dredged it. And deep in the mud, they found the device.
Okay, I'm a tech guy, but I'm also a realist. A smartphone sits at the bottom of a pond for weeks. It's full of silt, water, algae, the battery is toast, the circuits are fried. How on earth do you get anything off of that?
It's not like plugging it into a charger at Best Buy. This is highly advanced digital forensics. In a lot of cases like this, they have to perform what's called a chip-off extraction.
A chip-off?
Yeah, they physically desolder and remove the NAND memory chip from the motherboard and then read the raw data using a specialized reader. It completely bypasses the damaged phone hardware. Other times, they might clean the board ultrasonically and meticulously repair the microscopic power circuits just enough to get it to boot one last time.
So they perform this digital surgery, they get the file system to open up, and there, sitting in the memory, is a file. Time-stamped 7:27 a.m., May 28th.
The accidental video.
Set the scene for us. What are we looking at in this video?
It's 1 minute and 16 seconds long. The camera is facing straight up. The gyroscope's data would likely show it's lying flat on a table or a bench. It's not moving. There's no audio, which suggests that the microphone might have been obstructed or it was in a specific mode. But the video stream captures a man.
James Brenner.
James Brenner. And he is cleaning a gun.
That alone is incredibly suspicious given the timing. But it's the details on his person that really matter.
He has what appears to be blood on his arms. And he has what appears to be blood on his shirt.
Okay, pause. I have to ask. How does a phone record this without the user knowing? If I want to record a video, I have to unlock my phone, open the camera app, swipe over to video, and hit the big red button. How does a killer do this by accident?
We call it a phantom touch or an unintentional activation. Think about the design of modern smartphones. You have features like Quick Launch, where you double tap the power button to instantly open the camera. Or you can just swipe from the lock screen. So if Brenner picked up Dylan's phone, maybe to turn it off or just to move it out of the way, and his grip squeezed the side buttons in a certain way, boom, the camera's active.
And then he just sets it down, face up.
And the phone silently buffers and writes that video data to memory. He is standing there, wiping the blood of the victim off his own skin, cleaning the rifle he likely just used, and the victim's own device is sitting 2 feet away, creating the very file that will eventually bury him.
That is, poetic justice doesn't even feel like the right phrase for that. It's eerie. It feels like the universe itself intervening.
It's the very definition of the digital witness. Brenner thought he was completely alone in the desert. He didn't realize there was an eye on the table.
But the video wasn't the only thing the phone told them, was it? The GPS data painted a map of the entire aftermath.
This is where the timeline extends beyond that 32-minute window. The phone didn't just die at 7.27. The internal GPS logged a journey. It went from the shed to Dylan's own farm, then back to the shed area. And then the data showed a significant elevation change, a sudden drop into a depression or a trench. And then the phone sat stationary for 6 hours.
6 hours. If the phone is sitting in a hole for 6 hours, that implies the person holding it is pretty busy doing something in that hole.
Digging, covering, concealing. It places the device, and by proxy the killer, at the burial site for an extended period. And then finally, the phone moves from that location to the pond, where it was eventually discarded.
So they have the video, they have the GPS map, but a defense attorney, a good one, is still going to argue. You can't prove that's Dylan's blood in that grainy video. Maybe he was butchering a rabbit, maybe the GPS was glitching. They needed biology to back it up.
They needed to build the matrix. That's what you do in a case like this. You have to cross-reference the digital evidence with the physical evidence. And they found a crucial piece of physical evidence about 5 miles away from the farm.
The boots.
Dylan's boots. Found near a dirt mound, just seemingly discarded in the middle of nowhere. Forensics ran them. They found a blood stain on the side. They tested it.
Confirmed. Dylan Rounds.
Confirmed. But that wasn't all. On the top of the boots, near the laces in the opening, they found touch DNA.
DNA from just skin cells.
From skin cells left behind by handling. And that touch DNA belonged to James Brenner.
So let's reconstruct that for a second. Brenner's DNA is on Dylan's boots. Dylan's blood is also on the boots.
It implies Brenner was handling Dylan's boots while Dylan was actively bleeding, or very shortly after. He was likely removing them or dragging the body. There is absolutely no innocent explanation for that specific mixture of DNA on a pair of boots found 5 miles from the victim's home.
And the shirt, the one he was wearing in the video.
Authorities had seized it from Brenner's trailer during their search. They tested the spot that looked like blood in the video. It was blood. And the DNA profile matched Dylan Rounds. That is the convergence. That's the matrix. You have the video of the shirt. You have the physical shirt itself. You have the victim's blood on the shirt. You have the boots at the disposal site with both their DNA. You have the GPS from the phone linking all the locations. It was enough. They charged him with aggravated murder in March of 2023.
And here is the twist that frustrates so many people outside the legal system. There was no trial.
No.
They cut a deal.
They did. And we really need to explain why. Because it's controversial, I get it, but it's legally pragmatic.
So explain it. Why give a monster a discount if you have the shirt, the boots, the video, the DNA? Why not go for the maximum penalty for capital murder?
Because of the family. The no-body problem, even with all that evidence, is still a risk at trial. A jury could hang. A mistrial could happen on a technicality. It's not a slam dunk. And if Brenner walks, or even if he gets convicted but refuses to talk, Dillon stays in the desert.
Forever.
Forever. The Rounds family had to make an impossible calculation. They decided they wanted Dillon back more than they wanted the death penalty or a gamble on life without parole. They wanted a funeral. They wanted to bring their son home.
So the deal was you plead guilty to second-degree murder, which is a step down from aggravated, and you show us exactly where he is.
Correct. In the spring of 2024, Brenner accepted the deal. On April 9th, 2024, they transported him from his jail cell back out to Lucin. He pointed to a patch of ground.
And they found him?
Skeletal remains. Confirmed by dental records. Dillon Rounds came home nearly 2 years after he vanished.
And in that confession, we finally got the why. And honestly, I wish I hadn't read it. It makes me physically ill.
It's the absolute banality of evil. It's stunning.
Tell the listeners, why did James Brenner murder a 19-year-old boy who was just trying to farm sunflowers in the desert?
Because Dillon parked his grain truck in the shed.
A parking spot.
It was about to rain. Dillon put the truck under the only available roof. Brenner felt that the shed was his space, even though it wasn't on his property. He was, in his own words, mad that the truck was there.
A man's life, a mother's grief, 2 years of investigation, millions of dollars in resources, all because a squatter didn't like where a teenager parked a truck.
It highlights that frontier violence we talked about at the beginning. Brenner had lived so far outside of society's rules for so long that a minor inconvenience, a truck in a shed, triggered a maximum lethality response. He didn't have the conflict resolution skills of a civilized person. He had a gun and a shovel.
Let's talk about the judge, Judge Brandon J. Maynard, because he didn't let Brenner off easy, despite the plea deal limiting what he could do.
No, he threw the book at him as hard as the plea agreement would possibly allow. The sentencing was on July 1st, 2024.
The sentence was structured in a very specific way to ensure he never walks out right.
Exactly. The deal capped the murder charge, but it didn't cap the gun charges he was also convicted on. So he got 1 to 15 years for the second-degree murder. But then, Judge Maynard stacked the gun charges on top of it.
One after the other.
One after the other, consecutively. So 1 to 15 years for gun count 1, and 1 to 50 years for gun count 2.
And he ordered them to run consecutively.
Back to back to back, for a total sentence of 3 to 30 years. And the judge explicitly stated on the record that he intends to write a letter to the parole board recommending the maximum possible incarceration time. He also noted that Brenner refused to even look at the family in court, just zero remorse.
So justice, in its own imperfect way, was served, but the story doesn't end with the sentencing, because Candace Cooley, Dillon's mom, who from everything I've read sounds like an absolute force of nature, she realized the system itself was broken during that 2-year search.
She found the bottleneck, and this brings us to the real legacy of this case, Dillon's Law.
Walk us through the frustration she felt. Dillon goes missing. They know we have a phone. Why couldn't they just ping it immediately? We see it in movies all the time. Trace the call.
Right, the CSI effect, it's very misleading. In reality, the Fourth Amendment protects your digital data. Police need probable cause of a crime to get a warrant for your location data.
But he's a missing person. Isn't that enough cause?
See, that's the problem. Being missing in and of itself is not a crime. Adults in America are legally allowed to disappear. They're allowed to go off-grid. So the police were stuck in this legal trap. They had to prove foul play before they could get the data that would help them prove foul play. It's a classic catch-22.
And while the lawyers and judges are arguing about probable cause,
the golden hour of the investigation just ticks away. The phone's battery dies, the data gets overwritten, the trail goes cold. It took them weeks to get the warrants for the data that could have potentially found him in hours.
So HB 366, Dillon's Law, changed this.
It changes the threshold for emergency situations. It now mandates that telecom providers, AT&T, Verizon, you name it, must share location data as quickly as possible in emergency cases where there is a clear risk of death or serious physical harm. It shifts the priority from privacy first to life first in those specific extreme circumstances.
So if this happens again, if a kid vanishes in the desert,
the police can claim an exigent circumstance and bypass the lengthy warrant process for that initial critical location data. They get the ping, they find the phone, and maybe, just maybe, they find the person alive. Or at the very least, they find the crime scene before the rain washes all the evidence away.
And this covers everything on the phone.
It covers GPS, call logs, SMS, MMS, even browser history. It creates a mechanism for rapid response. It also requires counties in Utah to create these criminal justice coordinating councils to ensure the police on the ground actually know how to request and use this data effectively.
That brings me to the nonprofit the family started, Dylan's Legacy.
Yeah, the family didn't just change the law. They are actively trying to change the culture of these investigations. The nonprofit does a couple of things. First, it combats these predatory private organizations, those horrible scammers who call grieving families and promise to find their loved ones for a huge fee.
That is just repulsive. I can't even imagine.
It happens constantly. So Dylan's Legacy guides families away from that. But just as importantly, they fund training. They partnered with a detective named Aaron Benzik and his company, Badge Apps, to teach law enforcement how to actually use this cellular location data.
That is such a practical, smart approach.
It is, because passing a law is one thing, but if the local sheriff in a rural county doesn't know how to interpret a cell tower ping versus a GPS coordinate, the law is functionally useless.
Change the law, then train the people who have to enforce it.
Exactly. And then, in a final act of incredible transparency, on October 1st, 2024, Box Elder County released the full case file to the public. Over 3,000 documents, videos, interviews. They withheld the graphic photos of the remains, obviously out of respect for the family and grandma code, but they released the rest so the public could understand the concept of digital awareness in the modern world.
It's incredible. So, as we wrap this up, what are we really looking at here? What does the Dylan Rounds case ultimately tell us about the world we live in now?
I think if we connect all the dots, it's a story of modernity versus frontier violence. You have Dylan, who represents the future. He's using technology, agronomy, he has ambition. And you have Brenner, who represents this ugly relic of the past violent recidivism, settling petty grievances with a gun in the desert.
And in the end, it was the modernity that won,
Yeah.
the technology.
It was. Dylan's own phone became the witness that convicted his killer when he could no longer speak. It's a concept we're going to see more and more of, this idea of digital justice. The perpetrator thought the isolation of the desert would protect him, like it might have in 1980 or 1990.
Right.
But in the 2020s, we all carry inescapable witnesses in our pockets.
That is a profound thought. We carry witnesses in our pockets every time we send a text, take a photo, or even just walk past a cell tower. We are leaving this invisible digital footprint that could one day speak for us if we can't.
And thanks to Dylan's law in Utah, and hopefully similar laws elsewhere, those witnesses can speak up a lot faster when it matters most.
It's such a tragic story, but it's one that has left a permanent and I think positive mark on the justice system. Dylan Rounds wanted to grow sunflowers in the desert. He never got to see them bloom, but in a way, through this law and his family's tireless work, something pretty powerful has grown out of that hard ground anyway.
Well said. Very well said.
That's it for this deep dive. We've unpacked the case, the tech, and the law. But here's one final thought for you to chew on. We talked about how the phone was an accidental witness, but as we move into a world of smartwatches, smart cars, smart speakers, and smart homes, how long will it be until everything around us is a potential witness? And are we really ready for a justice system where privacy becomes the first casualty of truth?
That is the question we will all be grappling with for the next decade.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.